postcode you want the ambulance to come to, please?
Number 4, 5 months, Park Drive, Royden, Essex.
Alright, we'll get the last one for you.
He's drowned in the pool.
Right, sorry?
A fella's drowned in the pool.
Are they still in the water?
No, we've got them out.
You've got to know.
There's a party going on and someone's just gone out and found him. I'll tell you what, mate, the first time I've been out in 4 fucking years, I have my kids every weekend, and fucking hell, you don't expect it, do you?
Yeah, the ambulance is being turned around now, so that it's come back. If there's somebody out there ready, right?
Yeah, they're waiting out on the main road, mate.
Yeah, right.
Fucking hell. I think the geezer's dead, mate.
This is number 4, Beaumont Park Drive at Royden. It's Sunday the 1st of April 2001, time approximately 10:35 AM. This is the home of Michael Barrymore.
I would have been phoned in the morning to say that a person has been found in a swimming pool and he's dead, and we now need to know what the cause of death is. These are my original diagrams that I made when I examined Stuart. So the first page shows a number of small injuries that I identified. There's small abrasions, injuries you'd get if you removed, or when Stuart was removed from the swimming pool. I look and see if there's any scuffle injuries, restraint injuries, and I could find no injuries that showed that sort of pattern. When I went through the whole post-mortem with the police, it was my opinion that there was no third party involved in the death. As a result of that, it was my opinion, with fluid in the air passages and fluid in the lungs, that this was a case of immersion, as I call it, or drowning.
I wasn't convinced that drowning was the correct cause of death. Even though he was found in water, that does not mean that he has died there. Water can hamper investigations in terms of trace evidence. So we've now got to be confident whether he drowned or not. Dr. Calder is a well-recognised expert on drowning, and that was why he was involved.
Come on, and you, George, come on.
What's Ian doing, Dorothy?
Well, he's gone to collect his files. He keeps them in an old shed, locked up in the garden.
I said, I think there may be difficulties and troubles here because it's a high-profile case. They wanted to be sure that this was actually drowning because there was a lot hanging on it. What makes a perfectly fit and healthy chap drown? Stuart's lungs did not show the classical appearances of drowning. They were very heavy, much heavier than one expected, and also they did not appear to be overlapping each other in the chest cavity. Sometimes people inhale stomach contents, but there were no stomach contents I could see. There was no typical froth in the lungs because they'd obviously done some sophisticated resuscitation. Didn't add up to a classical drowning. One always, with these cases, one thinks, American expression, think dirty.
There were some findings that were clearly abnormal. There was petechiae present. Petechiae are pinhead-sized hemorrhages you get in the face and the eyes. They occur for a number of reasons, but one of them is that the neck has been compressed. In other words, someone has either been strangled or put in an arm lock.
When I first did my examination, it was apparent there was a lot of blood on the cloth that he'd been wrapped in. And that was around the pelvic region, and that showed that there was extensive hemorrhage from the region of the anus. There was clear dilatation of the anal canal. There were clear injuries around the anus, and those injuries included abrasions, they included bruising, and they included tearing of the anal wall. In the informal setting that we are here, I would describe the injuries to the anus as horrific.
The petechiae and the anal injuries are not simple drowning findings, and therefore they raise concerns that this person did not drown in the pool. Now, it's not my job to tell the police how to do their investigation, but it is my job to tell the police this may not be a drowning, and you should be aware of that.
The difficulty was that even after the second post-mortem examination, there still seemed to be some uncertainty about both the cause of death and the circumstances surrounding Stuart's death. Now, the assumption that he had drowned in the swimming pool, in my view, was based on rather tenuous and rather flimsy evidence. I think where we were agreed was that Stuart had been the victim of a serious sexual assault. The photographs showed a widening of the anal canal, laceration to it, highly suggestive of some large object having been forcibly inserted into the anus. It could have been an attempt at forcible fisting.
A bottle, a dildo, that sort of thing could have caused those injuries.
I was shown a photograph at the police headquarters, and it shows on the wall of the jacuzzi a pool thermometer that would have 4 cutting edges. An object like this, or even this object, could have produced the injuries I identified on Stuart's anus if this had been passed into the anal canal a number of times.
I cannot contemplate any circumstances where this was a consensual act.
Do you think Stuart was raped?
Well, I think that is a very likely scenario.
Michael Mansfield, on behalf of Mr. Barrymore, put a series of suggestions to witnesses to try and run the theory that the injuries might have been occasioned in a different way and not at the property.
Well, the CCTV footage of Stuart Lubbock leaving the nightclub seemed to indicate that he was perfectly fine.
Could it have been an accident? Stuart could have dive bombed into the pool.
That is an improbable explanation. Dive bombing into the pool would not cause these injuries.
The injuries might have been occasioned to Stuart during resuscitation by the repeated insertion of the rectal thermometer.
These probes are really only a couple of millimeters diameter. They're rounded at the tip and could not conceivably have caused the injuries.
At no stage through the inquest process did I hear anything from Mr. Barrymore that would lead me to believe there was an acceptance that there had been a serious sexual assault at the house.
This young man had suffered a very violent and very serious sexual assault. So perhaps, from my point of view, I think that would have been the most important aspect of the case. Here we have Stuart with both MDMA and cocaine in his bloodstream, and then this sudden assault. That combination could, in my opinion, very easily have caused him to have a sudden cardiac arrest. To me, that is one very plausible explanation to account for Stuart's death.
Why would you rape Stuart? It didn't make sense. And how did he get them injuries so severe that could have killed him? The pain he must have been in. It's just hard.
The thought of any interference with the body when it's in the mortuary, I couldn't accept for the simple reason. One is the body is wrapped up, and it was wrapped up when I was there present. And the other is that you've actually got bruising and tearing and bleeding from the anus. And if you were dead, that would not happen.
When you find bruising, it indicates that the person is still alive and their heart is still beating. So there's no doubt that he was still alive when those injuries were sustained. In my opinion, Stuart Lubbock sustained those injuries at Michael Barrymore's house. I think they've occurred shortly before his death.
The theory that this was essentially necrophilia, I think, is a fanciful explanation.
Were you surprised that the medics didn't notice the injuries to Stuart's anus?
No, not at all. It's quite common for forensic pathologists to pick up injuries that are not identified by clinicians, and that's why you do postmortem examinations, because we find things that other people don't.
The scene was secured, but not to the standard that we would expect, hence the reason that people were allowed back in there. And we know that items are now gone missing. Throughout the investigation, there have been suggestions there was a cover-up. Michael Brown, who was Michael Barrymore's PA at the time, was wrongfully allowed back into the scene where he was seen to be sort of tidying up some items. After we'd managed to photograph the scene, those items had gone missing and we'd never seized them. It was a handle from a cupboard from an outhouse and also a pool thermometer.
So what's your explanation on it?
That they've been removed to hide evidence. Stuart was assaulted quite possibly in the jacuzzi and then either died in the jacuzzi or went unconscious, and then to make it look like a drowning, thrown in the swimming pool. I believe very much that Stuart Lubbock was raped and murdered that night. Somebody at that party knows what happens. That is completely and utterly a fact. The key to bringing people to justice definitely sits with the 8 people that were there.